Hey folks, this is Jeremy. You're about to hear part of a three-parter episode that we recorded with Derick Varn. If you'd like to hear the entire episode, you can do so right now by heading to patreon.com/givingthemic.
I shall send a signal to that satellite beginning a countdown. 5 minutes thereafter, one bomb will be lowered deep into the heart of each pit. The satellite will in turn relay a microwave signal that will detonate all the bombs simultaneously. The multiple explosions will result in a global chain reaction. All the Lazarus pits throughout the world will overflow. The globe will be saturated with their chemical solution. And when the resultant cataclysm has abated, there will come a blessed peace. And this poor, defiled planet shall find itself restored to its former pristine glory.
But that will cost countless lives.
Actually, Detective, we have counted. 2,056,986,000. A most impressive plan, would you not agree?
Yes, I can see it clearly now for the first time. You are completely out of your mind.
Talking about the Christchurch manifesto, can you do a little bit of like a background on the eco-fascist stuff, or like where that actually comes from?
Well, there was a strain of the counter-enlightenment that goes back to Romanticism. We tend to think of Romanticism in the English tradition as fairly neutral. Mm-hmm. Byron and Shelley and Keats and their love of nature. But in the German tradition, a lot of those thinkers are the same kind of concerns. And some of those thinkers, aren't as quote unquote problematic as others. But like Herder and stuff, they had that string in them and like this return to a more natural state of being, which they tied to like Germanic culture going back to what Tacitus was writing about even. And so there's a big strain of like return to an organic lifestyle. And also this is reflected in like fascist and Nazi philosophers, because their view of the race and the nation was as an integral organic whole. So that also included ecology. And even in America, when you look at the beginnings of the ecology movement, there are two different strains of it. One of which is a kind of liberal, slightly left-wing, like a natural nature conservation. But there's also the Teddy Roosevelt kind, which does rhyme with fascism, kind of for a reason. It wouldn't say it's fascist or even explicitly proto-fascist, but there's a belief in like an organic, expanding nation which must take care of its natural resources, which is an extension of itself as a state. Mm-hmm. That's pretty early on. I mean, it's actually even like I'm tracing this back to the 19th century, and it's fully developed in the 20th. That said, it's hard to talk about eco-fascism because so many, right-wingers use it to slam lefties.
But it's frequently just used as a slur by a lot of people. Right.
So, Rush Limbaugh used to throw it around like at the Sierra Club. But it is interesting that, like, for example, Jay Sakai, who no one would ever accuse of being a right winger, pointed out that fascist notions of natural purity racially actually also reflect on their ecology, and that this there was an obsession with like pure typologies and like unpolluted land and unpolluted blood.
I was going to say, this is where we're getting into like blood and soil, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's the soil part of blood and soil. So, you have someone on the kind of anti-imperialist left like Jay Sakai, or Murray Bookchin talked about this a lot when he talked about like deep ecology. He was talking about David Foreman in particular in the 90s, like flirting with this organic wholeness that was very close to like natural purity stuff from Romantic nationalists, it does lay the mythology down for eco-fascism. So that's not surprising, and that strain is about 110 years old. In modern terms, there's people like Penny Lakota who would call themselves fascists. There's Troy Southgate, who was a member of the British National Party, used to write occasionally for Green Magazine. There is Atasha, and weirdly, I know some people attached to that who were these people obsessed with these. Not even primitives. They were anti-civilization, like terrorists in Latin America. And one of the people associated with that went so far as to praise fascism for killing people, but praise it for not but condemn it for not killing enough people. Fascism, we have critical solidarity with fascism because they kill people for no reason, but couldn't they be more ambitious and just wipe out more?
Very Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah.
Look at it, detective. One of the last of the rainforests. The world depends upon its oxygen, yet the rich see only profit in its destruction. You, who belong to the overclass, have much to answer for.
Bruce Wayne donates millions of dollars a year to preserve these forests,
which are being depleted at the rate of 120,000 acres a day. Does your money solve this problem? No. It will take more than wealth. It will take power. And I fear ruthlessness. Humankind must be forced to serve the planet instead of its own appetites.
And you're the one who'll do the forcing?
I am qualified, yes.
I mean, and it's hard to know if those people are trolling or not. Alain de Benoist, I am notoriously bad at pronouncing French, so people must forgive me, from the New Right in France. Also was really big into trying to reintegrate green politics into right-wing nationalism and ethno-nationalism. So it gets into it's all over Identity Europa in Europe. So it doesn't surprise me at all. Not even a little bit. But the problem, and this is a problem, is when I say this, it's going to be really easy for people to go, well, the Sierra Club is totally fascist because, and it's not just right-wingers who do it. There are some developmentalist leftists who do this too.
Well, one of the things that I think complicates this a little bit, though, is that I read the manifesto, and my impression is that that particular section was probably ironic, in my opinion, but it's hard to say, because the overwhelming majority of the manifesto is dedicated to the issue of diversity, and so I believe that, and given what he wound up doing, I think that was the motive.
It's hard to know that. I mean, there's other statements of that manifesto, like his talk about China, for example.
Which is, again, a offhand reference in one paragraph.
Right. So, he may be sincere, he may be completely trolling. But even if he is trolling, there's a real enough history, particularly with the Nouvelle Droite, the New Right in France, and with elements of the Romantic nationalists who were at least allies with the fascist, and particularly in had a big role in parts of Arya-Safi, which did contribute to some of the underlying ideology of the Nazis, where that really was a thing. It wasn't just ironic. So it's very hard to know. But the other thing about this is fascist in practice, not in rhetoric, tended to be ultra developmentalist too, and not really have that many non-superficial nature conservatory safeguards. So in power, they kind of ignore it.
Can you do a quick explain developmentalist real quick?
So developmentalist is just developing productive forces, even if it destroys most of your resources. I mean,
okay.
So, and libertarians make this argument. I mean, libertarians and lefties will sometimes, depending on the kind of lefty, rhyme on this. the working class is worth more than a rabbit. You'll sometimes hear people say something like that, or like you'll hear someone say, ironically, or maybe sometimes even not ironically, they're a smokestack socialist. Because if we develop the faith is if we develop enough technology, in capitalism, then we can use it to like scrub the air and do like bright green, projects to clean everything. And the thing is, the real history of that's mixed.
I was gonna say, is this almost getting into like with things that people accuse like Lee Phillips of doing, or Leigh Phillips?
Yeah, right. And to be fair, like Leigh Phillips is someone that I know pretty well, and I've interacted with for a while. I
have his new book sitting over on the I got from the library just yesterday.
He does have some rants on Greenpeace that get a little bit close to this. So I'm not going to say he's not guilty at all. I think it's sort of an over expansion of his position.
Okay, yeah.
But then some of the people he argues against, he's also arguing about as uncharitably as they are about him. So I tend to take all of this with a grain of salt. And as controversial as I can be, when it comes to stuff like this, I actually sit down and listen, because I think both sides have a lot of points. One of the ones that I bring up against Lee is like, the Soviets on paper had a pretty good ecological policy too, but they turned a lot of Central Asia into a wasteland. Like that's kind of an objective fact.
Jacob?
So,
well, I just found an interesting quote that I wanted to share. Putting aside contentious matters like global warming and resource depletion, countries should invest in national parks, wilderness preserves, and wildlife refuges, as well as productive and sustainable farms and ranches. The natural world and our experience of it is an end in itself. And I am paraphrasing very lightly Richard Spencer.
Yeah, no, that's not surprising at all.
Thank God you weren't actually quoting from that stupid document. I was like, I'm cutting out. There's no way in hell I'm putting that out on the air.
Different terrible manifesto.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, no, but Spencer likes to joke that if it wasn't for if he had an all-white state, that he would pretty much be a like a Keynesian liberal with green tendencies. But as long as it's only for white people.
Yeah, at some point it's like how much. Yeah, you really, and again, you can't tell how much them are being like just shit posting, but with him it's like, yeah, he probably believes the vast majority of that.
Yeah, I mean, with him, I think the guy wrote his master's thesis with Adorno. I mean, like, he probably believes most of that.
Yeah.
In fact, I have heard him speak on other areas about that, like, about the need to reduce the population to save the environment. And by reduce the population, he means reduce brown people.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on, and just kind of like either between like hippie culture or just like American or Western environmentalism or ecological thought that can get real reactionary real quick and like extremely like anti. Not just what's the word meaning like more intense misanthropy. It's full on like almost like getting a little bit on the genocidal side of like. Humanity is not a part of nature, and like we're worse than it's kind of, maybe it's okay that some people start getting wiped out, almost like some sort of like almost borrowing some sort of like neo-Malthusian take or something.
Well, I mean, this is where I think Leigh Phillips has a point, that it wasn't hard for Troy Southgate to infiltrate Green Anarchy magazine. It just wasn't. He didn't have to change that much, and that was in the 90s. But it was definitely not that hard. And when you look at a lot of there's a lot of calls for population control. It's very easy to have people see immigration as a threat to the environment. There's a lot of views of overpopulation that take on some very icky. I mean, where are the areas that are quote overpopulated, right? Like, they're cities, they're China, they're India.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that the dude who wrote the population bomb? Like, wasn't he like stomping around I can't remember if it was Mumbai or Calcutta or something, and just kind of like bemoaning, like physically disgusted at the massive humanity of unwashed brown humanity around that. And anyway, like this,
right? Yeah, it seems like
70s.
It's a misguided anger at this poverty is disgusting. It must be too many people.
Yeah,
I mean, like, yeah. It's not hard for that to go reactionary pretty quickly. And honestly, I think that in the late aughts, around when gas was really expensive, frankly,
right,
a lot of people became peak oilers.
Oh God! Oh Christ! Not yeah. And what's his face? God, what was his name? Peak oil guy.
Which one?
The one who was writing about that, who seemed a bit. Kunstler? Was it Kunstler?
Yeah, Kunstler, James Howard Kunstler. Yeah,
writing and who seemed to be a bit too gleeful about some of that stuff. It's like, motherfucker, do you know exactly who this is going to hit first?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of that. Primitivists also tend to be a little bit like that. But I remember listening to Kunstler, and he sounded more and more conservative over time. There were a lot of podcasts out of that kind of milieu that, they got one of them. I'm not going to name names because I'm still friends with this person, but like, he was like, well, maybe Charles Murray has something rational to say.
Oh boy.
And he came out of that like Doomer R. It was like Doomer. It was peak oil R or the Singularity. Like the same people were obsessed with both.
Well, hold on. Did I miss a memo here? I mean, peak oil is still a thing, right?
Yeah,
we didn't
but
solve
not
oil.
to the same extent as it was in 2008. I mean, peak oil is also not wrong in some basic sense. We will eventually peak, and we might actually have now what peak oil in the late aughts didn't account for is
fracking
technology, and tar sands.
Right. I think, but I think the peak oil thing, it was, like I said, it wasn't just the concept of, because these things are never the concept. It's the culture around it. And there was, like I said, Kunstler and a bunch of people who were really, like I said, he's talking about like, hey, because I remember there was a bit that he mentioned talking about, I think this might have been tar sands or something about. But the example that he tipped his hand a little bit too much with the example that he drew, talking about, we'll have to use tar sands and getting oil from shale, and the Nazis did that or something like that. He went just grabbing that as like a particular example as some sort of like way to backstop his argument. So.
Yeah, one of the stranger things that I found him, he has this weird love of the 19th century city as kind of an aesthetic norm that does betray a certain kind of cultural conservatism that he's not admitting to.
A city on which continent? But in which continent, though? And like,
that's a good question. Right?
Which half of the 19th century? Yeah,
I think he means New England without the factories. Like,
good luck, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's not even as kind of reactionary as people get into primitive territory who, literally argue for a lifestyle that require 99.5% of the population to die to be maintainable.
Yeah, and I think that we're going to hear more, especially when people start talking about, and you can hear it a little bit about when they decry like wasteful lifestyles, but it's in the talk. It's when they start talking about air conditioning that there's something that there's a crack there, and it's in talk about how like we might have to like refuse air conditioning and what's up without really realizing or fully accepting like what that actually means. Because like, guess what? In plenty of places where plenty of people live, you don't, and for example, Chicago, you don't have air conditioning, and you're in the wrong kind of building, you die.
On the other hand,
same with Georgia.
If we're talking about someplace like Phoenix, I think I can write that off.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's funny though, because when people do that with Georgia, they think they're talking about a bunch of right hicks, and what they're actually talking about is urban black people.
Yeah.
Without realizing it. because they don't really understand. Like, they're in such a rarefied milieu, they don't really understand the places where they're talking about. And this is something where I'll still almost sound like a conservative ranting about people from Portland, no offense, where I'm just like, when you hear these liberals like, kick the South out, I'm like, but that's where, like, I don't know, 60% of the African Americans are.
Yeah. It's
like...
people dump on, it's like the concept, and you mentioned that you talked, God, we're getting into like a third episode of territory. You talk about this with your conversation with Ed Simon, that it's like people talk about or a lot of a very particular kind of like metropolitan, cosmopolitan, like Manhattanite, like professional media liberal cannot countenance the concepts of Georgia and Atlanta at the same time.
Right.
Or check that. Georgia, Atlanta, Cobb County, and Athens. There we go. There's a gamut.
Yeah, and the Cobb County is like right outside of Decatur.
Yeah.
Or where I live in Macon, which is a bright blue city as far as the voting for Democrats, and a very mixed area, but the entire area is increasingly majority minority, like not even just the urban area. Like that's also true for rural portions of the area too, but no one seems to even know that. So yeah, I can rant about people's misguided notions of how class work because they don't really understand geography, but yeah, and that's another episode.
Yeah, I was going to say, growing up in the suburbs of Michigan, suburbs of Flint, as a middle class kid, it's one of those things where it kind of you learn, it's like, you learn that the whole like blue state red state thing is bullshit just because of General Motors post-war hiring patterns, because they would they sent buses down to the south to because they needed workers.
Well, actually, the whole system was developed because of satanic ley lines.
That would at least make more sense than what happened, but. All right, I think that's that. I think we're pretty much tapped.
We got 3 hours and 10 minutes all over the place. So.
Yeah. Anything you've been digging on lately you want to recommend?
Oh, let's see. Spending less time on Facebook. That's a good one.
That's evergreen.
Let's see. I've been reading.
Is there an app for that?
I don't know. I've been reading Hammer and Hoe, which is about rereading it, because it's about the interesting work that a lot of the Second International, even though it was kind of Marxist-Leninist, did in the South, laying the groundwork for the civil rights movement, which is interesting because it kind of, like, as far as Marxist historiography goes, it kind of makes everybody look bad because it gets thrown under the bus by the MLs as soon as the Popular Front develops, because they're too hostile to the Democrats in the South. And they, and Stalin needs FDR, to play along.
That's by Robin D.G. Kelly.
Yep. And, that it's a pretty interesting book, and it's even more interesting if you read around it. So, like, it doesn't go into some of the history that I'm talking about, but if you know that's going to happen, then it makes it pretty poignant. Let's see, other things that I would suggest doing. I'm going through a deep dive into Mike McNair's revolutionary strategy and trying to argue with it.
I started reading that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he's got some good points, but it's so dense that sometimes I wonder if he's covering too much at a time to be, like, for me to actually completely agree with his conclusions. And I've been reading a lot lately on, this is going to sound a little bit out of left field, but on emotional intelligence and kind of wondering if maybe lefties need to, like, call Jordan Peterson out on their game by actually, like, maybe straightening up their room.
Is that a shot at me?
No, but I actually have been thinking about that, because I'm always like, Peterson's such a nut, but, like, there are some things where we really do need to just be better at our emotional regulations and how we deal with politics. It would make us much more effective.
Yeah, I have a copy of Daniel Goleman's book up on the bookshelf there. I think I've only heard the audio version.
Yeah, well, I've been reading that and a couple other things, and also I've been reading weirdly all these Robert Greene books and thinking about how to apply them to Marxism.
Wait,
so like
48 Laws of Power guy?
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do I apply this to Das Kapital? Like, what can I get out of this as far as like class and organizing? And it's actually been fascinating. And his Laws of Human Nature book it's over essentializing for sure, but it's not actually anti-left wing at all. And so like I'm beginning to think like maybe we shouldn't cede all the self-help to crazy right-wingers, which you know, a fifth topic, but it's something maybe we should think about.
That is true. It's kind of because I've been think there's a in the office that I moved to when I transferred departments. There's a bookcase that has a lot of like that particular genre fluid of business self-help lit. And one of it, I was looking at the thing and wondering like at what point was it worthwhile to start diving in and start. It's a new version of the Salvage Project. Hey, Channel Me Avio, custom that, but diving into and extracting out of all of this, like I said, billions of hours and money poured into business and self-help. How do you make small groups work? How do you achieve goals or kind of like measure effectiveness and try to see if any of that is practical for leftist projects.
Yeah, how do you actually call in for real as opposed to just rhetorically?
Right.
Like because honestly, in some ways, the corporate people are better at that. They have to be.
Yeah.
So maybe we can use that against them.
Yeah.
And so like that would be my last take is like, read some normie books and try to like figure out how it applies to your life in ways that you in really radical ways. Don't just cede it over to corporate management. Like maybe we can use this against them.
Why not? Somebody has to. Jacob,
exactly.
What do you got?
I would like to recommend Sabrina by Nick Dernasso, which is a original graphic novel that came out last year, I believe. And it is, at its simplest, a book about a woman who is killed under unfortunate circumstances and how the people around her react to that. But it's this really powerful tale that I think uses comics as a medium very effectively. And
cool.
I think more so than a lot of books I've seen really manages to capture the feeling of modernity and just that sense of alienation and disconnection and confusion. And there's a lot of just very sparse, empty panels, and there's this just consistent fear that I think builds throughout the story. And there's even a Alex Jones type radio host on it.
Ooh.
And I really can't recommend this strongly enough. It's a fantastic read. It was nominated the first graphic novel, I believe, to do so for the Man Booker Prize.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And it's not particularly graphic in any way. You don't, see people getting cut up. It's not a From Hell situation. It's very much about the effect of death and about how the media reacts to that and how we're basically all sort of slowly going crazy together.
Wow.
And I was impressed.
That sounds like a good recommendation.
Yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, you should definitely check it out. It touches on a lot of the stuff we talked about tonight.
And who wrote it again?
Nick Dernasso.
Hey, put out by?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. I don't know if it Boom or Image or Vertigo or anything.
Oh, no. I assume it was probably like Top Shelf or something.
Okay, yeah. That sounds about right. It's
sort of hippie shit that they would do.
Is Top Shelf Portland or where are they? Okay, yeah, I can. There's like so many like indie presses in town. The two things that I will recommend is one is I guess you could call her a singer-songwriter, but it's more of like she does a lot of like indie bedroom pop out of Norway. There's a 20-year-old solo artist who tours with a band. Her name goes under the name Girl in Red. that I think she did. I don't even know if she put out like a full album yet, but maybe like an EP and a bunch of singles. It's just really good, great, indie rock. I mean, yeah, a lot of them are like kind of teenage love songs, but they're from a queer girl's perspective. Most of the songs are in English, even though she's Norwegian, and it's pretty good. I'll play a little clip of it. And for reading, I just started reading Mark Fenster's Conspiracy Theories, Secrecy and Power in American Culture, which I can't remember where I actually got. I don't remember if Derick was like listening to you guys talk about it or somewhere, but it's so I am liking it so far because it's actually talking about conspiracy theories, but with from the aspect of like power. And like he's like, he mentioned, so far he's mentioned there are references in there to like he's mentioning, like he talks about, ideology, and there's a couple bits of like about Marx, and even, I think he even like quotes I think he quotes everything from like, there's some like Gramsci and Stuart Hall quotes in there too. So this is like the first edition of it came out in 1999. And I think he put out a revised edition sometime after 9/11. So, that is Mark Fenster's Conspiracy Theories. All right, wrapping things up. Derick, do you have anything to plug?
Listen to Symptomatic Redness, my podcast, which I think is actually like increasingly the main of Zero Books podcast feed. I will be on Sectarian Review talking about Wicker Man soon, but I don't know if it'll be out by the time that this will be out. But look, podcasts are evergreen, so
that's true.
You'll probably find that.
Which version of Wicker Man?
Oh no! Not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Open my eyes! My eyes! Ah!
The 70s one, which is good, as opposed to the
Oh, you didn't? Oh, so you didn't do both?
Far superior, excellent.
No, I thought we thought about talking about both, but I have a trouble subjecting myself to Neil LaBrute, frankly. But let's see. I'll be in New Orleans at the New Orleans Poetry Festival in 3 weeks in April.
Cool.
So if anyone's in NOLA wants to meet me, hang out, I'll be there. And that's those are my pluggables.
Awesome.
You can follow me on Twitter at I don't remember, Skep Poet, I think.
Yeah, I think it's Skep Poet.
But my Twitter's really boring. And something else. I'm on Instagram. You can see me losing weight and looking really hostile in front of famous places.
It's good to have a theme. And do you want to mention your book?
Oh, yeah. I have a book called Apocalyptics. It was released by Unlikely Press out of New Orleans. And it's available on Amazon and through Unlikely, which I'd rather you buy it through Unlikely than through our Bezos overlords. But still,
yep.
I'll take any books. Give me your money.
I enjoyed it. Yeah, so check it out, folks.
Cool.
Jacob?
You can find me at Twitter at Jacob Mercy. I just put up a YouTube video, and I don't know how to get my own custom YouTube address yet, so just do a search for Jacob Mercy, I guess. If you want to get in touch with me, make an album or write a comic or something, just try to impress me. I'm bored with the usual emails.
You have such high standards.
I do.
And always, if you need to get a hold of us, we are at facebook.com/givingthemic, givingthemic at gmail.com, on Twitter, givingthemic. We do have a Patreon somehow, and I'm starting to put more and more like kind of like bonus little, not necessarily like fun, like locked off episodes, but definitely like extra, like, you know, extended conversations on there too. Available at patreon.com/givingthemic. And yeah, this has been a hell of an evening. Thanks a lot, Derek, for being willing to chat with us about this long and winding road.
Yeah, it's a little bit all over the place, but it's been fun.
Yeah, well, all right, and thanks, Jacob, for being able for hanging with us.
Sure, I like the parts where Varn said I was right.
Oh, there you go. See, everybody got something out of it. Okay, and I guess with that, thank you, Derek, and I guess we'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later, man.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Victory is yours, detective. Perhaps it is time I am finally one with the planet I so love.